we could start. We have now 14 people here in the room, so I welcome to you all. Let's see if more people are joining us along the presentations, but I think we must start because we should try to accomplish the time that we have for this discussion. So we will have 3 speakers. Rafael, Jan Franzen, and Oksana also. Okay, from this order, first I will give the floor to Rafael Bompan. I don't know if I pronounce it correctly, but okay. Nearly, more or less on the right or the left. Well, this is an issue very important for us because I think that the model of governance today can make really a difference between territories and process in a territorial basis. Even if we are speaking of a community, a village, a town, or a big rural area. So I think governance is very important for establishing the process with or without people who live in those communities or those territories. So I think it's an issue of the present, but also for the future, very important. So I hope we can have a very good and learn with each other a lot from these 2 hours. And I hope also that this moment can be only a start for another meetings and another ways of trying to put the governance in an agenda for the future. So I'm not going to say anymore. I'm just going to leave the floor to Rafael. Please do it.
Thanks, Ed. First of all, here I am. I'm Raffaele Bompan. I'm working for an organization I will tell you about in very few words, which is a pan-European organization called EBN, European Business Innovation Center Network, located in Brussels. My organization and myself in particular, we thank you very much, the organizer of this very interesting event. I attended a few other sessions today, and I have to say it's really, really very, very interesting. And in particular myself, I know part of the organizer, some of the organizer of this event. That's why I was asking before. We have a long history of cooperation, especially with Iradier and the Alentejo region. So I'm very happy that we can share our experience regarding the governance. And I prepared some slides which I would like to share with you in order for us then to share a bit also the flow of the conversation. So let me share these. If you see it, please confirm. Here we go. Okay, so from your nodding, I understand you see it. So that's the template Camilla sent. Camilla from the colleague from Iradier sent to us. I will talk about first in my presentation about my organization, and then of course the experience of my organization in the smart communities and the governance of smart communities in particular. I am a senior advisor in the organization. I've been working in EBN since 2007, so 14 years. I deal with specific subjects in the organization, like this representing the organization around, taking care of the IP, in particular intellectual property, and also last but not least, taking care of some projects. That's why also we had this cooperation with Iradier. In any case, talking about my organization, very quickly, it's an open community which is composed by 2 kinds of members, which are EUBIC, so business incubators, which are certified by us, and associate, which are organizations similar to incubators, but they still not have the capabilities or the necessity to be incubators. Of course, all the network is various, is composed, is very multifaceted. Has been created in 1984 by the European Commission to manage incubation in Europe, and since then we are operating then to this aim. After a few years, as a pilot project, of course, we turn into a private non-governmental organization, and we are, of course, in Brussels, very close to the European Commission. This is more or less some. These are more or less some numbers about my organization, just to frame, you know, the situation what we are talking about. More than 175 members, with the outreach, which is very large, because you can imagine these incubators, how many client companies they have. So we are talking about very much on the average. I mean, very much rough calculation is about 25,000 companies, which ranges from startups to small medium enterprises in all phases of development. And of course, we have a very good business expert database with us, so we can then help in this sense the innovation stakeholder in Europe. These are the typology of our members, which are, as you can see, I was telling to you, various. Of course, we have also a strategic partnership with other organizations, like very big ones, of course, with the European Commission, which created us, but also other organizations, specialized organizations like, for instance, the European Patent Office, the European Space Agencies, and so on and so on. So many of them, including also the organization dealing with you know, specific thematics for companies, like for entrepreneurs, like business angels, even, for instance, ANSES, so the organization dealing with incubation in grouping the incubators in Spain. These are more or less our outreach in Europe. We have also external members, which are located in United States, Brazil, Mexico, Southeast Asia, China. We have a very large, again, we are pan-European, but with very international context, intercontinental context. Our service, we have a lot of services for our members. Here I mentioned some of them. In particular, matchmaking and visibility in this sense are very important. We are talking because of this reason. We have also Meet and Connect, which is also very important for our companies. But generally speaking, our core business is the EU-BIC certification, where we really engage ourselves in this control of the incubation in Europe. We have also special interest groups in which we deal with specific activities related to one industrial sector. I'm taking care, for instance, in this list in the space special interest group. And of course, we have an organization now. I cannot tell you all the details, but if you want, we can, of course, talk separately about that. The philosophy at the base of our approach to innovation is all about mutual learning, exchange of best practices, and as well as networking. So you can see that we are very much open organization and very much keen on having feedback from members and even from external entities. We have, of course, we're longing for high visibility, credibility, transparency. We have to note that we have the only existing international database of incubation and acceleration industry. This is because of our existence since the beginning of this European arrangement, European organization. Of course, then, you know, there are many other services. Going back and going directly into the point of the smart community governance. EBN, of course, during the work, during this pluridecennial work in Europe, of course, witnessed a change in the paradigm from rural to urban realities, and of course, then later shift to smart cities, to smart communities. This gave us an ideal positioning for us to appreciate this kind of modification in sharing common interest or similar interest in the use and in the creation of partnership in order to use information to transform activities and the lives of citizens and workers in specific areas. Again, this is visual appreciation of what we have done over the years, especially smart communities. In this sense, in these very last years, we really perceived the fact that we're going towards an intercorrelated governance into this kind of communities. Much more than smart cities, much more than the previous models, of course. This is the concept that I dare say it's closer to what we think about smart communities and governance of smart communities in our organization. So basically, a community in which all the stakeholders share and understand the potential of information technology. So, and then decide for the use of technology to transform their life and their work. And of course, then all the system, both from I would say political and social, environmental point of view, in a positive way. So that's more or less, it's very close to our idea. That's why I took the liberty of mentioning here. We have an holistic view of the smart communities as well, because again, our organization is based on cooperation. It's based on sharing values. It's based on collaboration and partnership. On purpose, I didn't mention so many services we have dealing specifically with this aspect of working life, or our daily working life, with our members and with the other stakeholders in Europe, because I wanted to focus on this slide. Basically, we have a lot of services, including, for instance, a soft landing platform, so a mobility of entrepreneurs into areas of Europe, exploiting the possibility to be hosted by our incubators, as well as many others, like sharing best practices, cooperating in terms of project activities, even European project, but project of any kind, so even outside of Europe, outside of the European framework, mainly Horizon 2020 in the past framework program. Now it will be Horizon Europe, but of course this is something that goes into the mainstream of cooperation and collaboration. As you can see, this holistic view of ours combines together the society, environment, economy together in order to create the cooperation between what I mentioned there, the authorities, the education sector, the security, the commerce, the work and the environment together, in order then to create a sustainability, fair and viable economy, and people-friendly society together with the environmental care. That's what we have in our mind when we talk about governance in smart communities. Of course, smart communities in EBN network are very present. We have the network of EBN, as I was telling you, and as you saw on the map, it has an extremely wide outreach outside at the level of a country, of macro regions. Normally, we talk about NUTS2, so Nomenclature Unité Territoriale Statistique, level 2, macro regions. We have also, again, very, very much focus on region, and this is why we are talking here thanks to Alentejo, for instance. and also municipality. At municipality level, we are very active when municipality is particularly active or particularly significant in this sense. What we created over time in order for us, because the concept of smart communities was already in a larval state, I mean, in a very primal form internally to our to the essence of our organization, and the team for innovation stakeholders that have been always present in our work, in our action, and in this sense, this for us it was and is still easy to assure the smooth transition, the smooth effective digital transformation into old structure of the society. So for us, we are privileged, I have to say, and we're very lucky because we have the capability of using and influencing, working together, and sometimes using also all these elements to create then this to contribute to the smart transformation. Additionally, again, the organization is positioned, EBN is positioned as one of the most important counterparts of smart communities all over the country, because we are very close to the European Commission, because we are very active and we are very close to other organizations dealing specifically with these thematics or which add these thematics in their agenda as a very important point. The priorities for us, on the basis of what I was telling to you before, are again also in connection to the special interest groups I was explaining to you before. So some of the points of our action are to sustain urban mobility and district environment, ecological sustainability, to integrate infrastructure, of course, with all the consequences, so benefit consequences of these, focus on citizen, more focus on citizen, integrated planning and management when we have to deal with changes, when we have to, in a way, create policies and enforce activities in Europe at level of macro region, especially at the level of macro region, and then, of course, all the rest which is connected to knowledge sharing, open data governance. This is what we are doing in EBN. Our role in governance, we try to facilitate the participation of our members, at all level of governance, providing the best support. Of course, again, on the basis of our position in Europe. We suggest improvement at the policy level, especially at the when we talk about EU institutions and local governments, trying always to keep in mind the principle of transparency and close contact with local entities, which are governmental bodies or close to local entrepreneurs. And then, of course, we try to, again, in our role, it's also to support and service all the public and private innovation stakeholders in this sense, in this smart governance activity. What I can say, this is the experience of EBN over the year. In this last slide, I would like to just mention some what we learned over the years about smart communities, about governance of these smart communities. Again, we witnessed this change of paradigm, which brought us from a rural Europe, so a Europe which was very much devoted to agro-food. I remember many years ago there was all the big debate about milk, for instance. So you see, nowadays we don't talk so much about that anymore, but still there. So anyway, this transformation is again moved us towards to put a focus on smart communities over the years. So that's the experience of EBN is not changed so much over the year, in the sense that we still very much active in facilitating the transformation and putting emphasis of some of these stakeholders involved. What we have done, it's the base of, created an experience which allowed us then to move towards this. What we also can say regarding this passage towards smart communities, and again, the governance which should be behind this passage, is about, of course, the creation of omnicomprehensive tech infrastructure, but at the same time on the based on the democratization of services, because of course we have the idea of creating the possibility for every citizen then to keeping in mind the entrepreneurship level to become an entrepreneur from our point of view, but of course then to become other possible innovation actors in Europe. So from our point of view, we are very focused on this, but of course we try to enlarge the concept. For us, it is very important now. What we can suggest is that it's very high time to support this transformation, generating huge opportunities, as I wrote in the slide, because we feel that this is very much important, not only from I would say industrial point of view, but especially and from an environmental point of view. In this sense, we follow very much the three pillars indicated by the European Commission in these last months. So, for instance, for Horizon Europe. So the green, in particular, is very much we are very much focusing on this in this very moment. And then again, as a final word, I have to say that we are still very much proactive, and we try always to enlarge the network, to involve external partners, in order for us to create smarter ways for improving this sense of community, for improving real use of the potentiality, European potentiality, social, industrial, environmental, entrepreneurial level. So that's my reflection on the base of my work and my experience in my organization, in the European Business Innovation Center Network, on the smart communities governance. I don't know if you have questions, or Helder, if you want to go on with us.
Thank you very much, Raphael. The plan, we must stick to him, is that we can make the three presentations of the speakers. Then we will have a time, I think it's a generous time, for debating all the three presentations, and I think it will be very, very good. So thank you very much for your presentation, Raphael. And
my pleasure.
I give the floor to Jan Franzen, and it's more or less the same, 15 to 20 minutes for each one, okay? Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Helder, for first of all inviting me for this meeting, and Raphael, thank you for your presentation. I very much enjoy the way you look at it, starting from the need to collaborate and bringing actors together in order to enter into a transformation towards smart communities. In fact, I would like to focus on one of these aspects, and that is that smart communities, when we make that transition, we should also try to make sure that they are just and inclusive. Right? And when we talk of smart communities, we include everybody. And that, I think, is a major challenge, and a challenge which demands governance. So let me share my screen, and then maybe also first very briefly introduce myself. Okay. I assume you can all see my screen. So, my name is Jan Franzen. I work for Erasmus University Rotterdam for an institute called IHS, Institute of Housing and Urban Development Studies. And in this center, I do research and give advice on smart cities, smart communities, particularly from the focus of inclusiveness, and as a link maybe to Raphael's presentation, also from the angle of local economic development. What I want to discuss this time very briefly is, are smart communities exclusive? Is that a real risk? And then look at different governance perspectives, look at smart communities. One thing which is very popular is benchmarking. Another thing which is happening a lot is branding ourselves as smart communities, as smart cities. Living labs, co-creation, experiments are incredibly popular. And finally, say something on inclusive innovation systems, though I believe this has also been addressed in the previous presentation, so I can keep that short. And then try to come to some conclusions. Last week, Joe Biden made a very important statement, I think, when he presented his new infrastructure policies. He noted trickle-down economics have never worked. He, of course, referred to the policies of Reagan and Thatcher, which started that you reduce taxes for the rich, and then you hope that when the rich create more employment, when the economy grows, that would trickle down to everybody. He notes the trickle-down economics have never worked. We need more than the private sector. We need a strong government, according to Joe Biden. Maybe more broadly, we need strong governance to make sure that our economies are more inclusive. And the same, I think, is true for the smart community. If we are pushing for a smart digital economy with strong entrepreneurship, and as Richard Florida calls it, a strong creative class, people who can bring innovation in industries, people who can digitalize our societies, then there's a great risk that such policies are exclusive, that not everybody will be able to jump on the bandwagon. And in fact, Richard Florida, some of you may have heard of him, an American geographer. He was first the developer of the idea of the creative city. And then later on in 2017 wrote this book, The Urban Crisis, in which he points out that the creative class may also lead, or in fact does also lead, to growing inequality and deepening segregation, whereby the middle class may disappear and inequality within society may increase. So there's a real challenge, I think, in developing smart communities, that our policies do not automatically trickle down, but it needs serious governance and government interventions to make sure that we leave no one behind. There's a second challenge, somewhat related, and it relates to this idea of a panopticon. A panopticon is the building you see on the, for me, left-hand side of the screen. It's a prison, and in the prison there's a tower. In the tower there's a guard, and the guard can look into the prison of every prisoner and can see at all times what they are doing. And the prisoners don't know if they are being watched or not, but they can be watched at any moment of time. They know that. And the famous French philosopher Foucault called this the most cruel, most ingenious cage you can develop, because it doesn't only take away privacy or your right to freedom, it takes away your privacy. You're being watched all the time. Well, of course, the risk is that the digital society would do the same. It creates an environment where people can always follow our mobile phones, can always track us, and what we do is always measured and known. And hence the EU policy that we all have a right to be informed when this is happening, to protect us. Now, according to some people, we are living in a post-panopticon society. We are not prisoners, of course, we have more freedom, but this idea that ICT can be used to check and monitor what everybody is doing, and we don't have a good say on how that information is used, is, I think, very valuable. And also, again, demands governance to make sure that our data is protected and that not powerful ICT firms run away with all the data and the knowledge, increasing the inequality previously mentioned, and ultimately leading to societies and communities which are more and more excluded from data, from decision-making processes, and from opportunities. There's quite some study which show that these disadvantages of smart communities are really happening. This is based on the study in South Korea of one of our PhD students, Yi-Rang Lim. She did a very big study, and South Korea has a very large programs on developing smart communities. And it shows that smart communities on average have a higher income. There are more patents, so more innovation, also linked to the previous presentation. On the other hand, in smart communities, we find higher income inequality, and it has increased over time after becoming smart. People experience more information insecurity, and they feel that information and decisions are not very transparent. So the two challenges I briefly mentioned before, we also find in this particular case in South Korea. By the way, you can see here a map of South Korea. All the blue places are where there are smart communities which were started, and the red are the ones which are more advanced. They are what they call second generation smart communities in South Korea, more attention to inclusion. But we find that despite that, there's more attention to inclusion, there's still more income inequality, more informal information insecurity, and less transparency. Now, of course, South Korea is not Portugal. So, based on what I mentioned so far, the question is, how can urban governance, or how can governance of smart communities overcome exclusion and inequality within such a smart community? And this is a big topic, so I only look at a few things quickly. One is governance by benchmarks, and I want to start with two quotes. The first is a quote of Thomas Johnson, who said, "Perhaps what you measure is what you get. More likely, what you measure is all you'll get, and what you don't measure is lost." And Peter Drucker, a famous business management guru, said, "If you can't measure it, you can't improve it." And I think this is very true in a smart community, where we are collecting more and more data, and we are using that data to improve services for the community. But communities are very complex things, also smart communities. People have many dreams, many visions, do many different things, and not everything is measured. So there's a bit of a risk in only making policies based on data. Participation is really important. And we know this very well in the Netherlands. Our last government fell over a huge mistake they made. Families can get child benefits, right? Some funding to, particularly for larger families which are there. And within the smart systems that were developed, there were checks to check for fraud. And in these checks for fraud, which were fully automated based on very clever systems, people were said to be fraudulent, thousands of people, tens of thousands of people. And only much later, only last year, it was found out that these systems were faulty, that there was discrimination and mistakes in the system. The government fell because of the way the smart community was governed with benchmarks. Something else which is really very popular is branding. Branding of smart communities as smart, and increasingly these days as also inclusive. We are doing a study at the moment to check how smart cities are being branded, and to what extent and how brands are translated in policies. And if these same cities are also branding themselves as inclusive with policy interventions, and then trying to find out the tension between these two. Whereby, of course, being inclusive is a very complex term, right? Are we including all ages, people with disabilities, different religions, different races, gender, income, location? And then people can be included and excluded on many different topics. Here we look at 3 particular cities and try to compare them, 3 cities from different regions, which all call themselves smart and inclusive. Dubai, Amsterdam, and Toronto. And of course, these are really very different cities. The more bullets there are in one box, the higher the score. So the more policies we find, the more it really brands itself as smart. And we can see that all 3 cities truly brand themselves as smart. Amsterdam scores slightly less because it has many other policies and a bit more varied kind of lobbying. and branding. When we look at inclusion, we see very big differences between the three cities and within the three cities. What we see, particularly interesting, is that none of the cities is really addressing inequality related to income and wealth. And that's interesting because we've just seen that smart communities have a tendency to be more unequal. And now we find that even cities who claim to go for inclusive communities are not really addressing this fundamental issue. So inequality based on income, wealth, and also location, gentrification are not really addressed in these cities. If we look at Dubai, we notice something else. Dubai is really addressing inclusion or exclusion based on age. So it's trying to make, for instance, public transport accessible for the elderly and build buildings, and the same for disabilities. So buildings, transport are more accessible for the elderly and the disabled. But Dubai has chosen not to become more inclusive based on religion, race, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, for instance, which is, considering its culture and its location, quite understandable. If we look at Amsterdam, we see almost the opposite. And in fact, it's true. If you look at the bus system in Amsterdam or buildings, there are some doubts about its access for age and disability, while Amsterdam is profiling itself based on gender, race, religion, and equality. So what we conclude is that when communities, or in this case cities, claim they are smart and inclusive, they are cherry picking. They are choosing some items to be inclusive, which are easy, or if you want, within their comfort zone. Another governance strategy which is incredibly popular is living labs, experiments. We see them everywhere. Amsterdam is renowned as a smart community, a smart city, which is pretty inclusive. It's often mentioned as a best example, that's a Freudian mistake, as a best case. And when we look deeper, what we see is in Amsterdam, there are many different projects. And each of these projects, when you evaluate it, is doing pretty well. It's not so very inclusive very often because it tends to be for the willing and the able, but it's achieving a lot. So there are a lot of good projects which operate more or less in splendid isolation. And the Smart Amsterdam program, which by the way falls under the Economic Development Board in Amsterdam, coordinates all of this, but is not very good and faces a lot of difficulty in scaling it up, in learning, and in actually expanding it to include everybody. Well, let me end with an example from Rotterdam. I'm myself from Rotterdam, so you may know that there's always disagreement about Rotterdam and Amsterdam, if only in football. But I must admit, in this case, Amsterdam is doing a better job in making its smart communities also inclusive, in governing the program within the Smart Amsterdam program, even if I'm critical about the splendid isolation between the different projects. What we try to do now in Amsterdam is Rotterdam wants to become the digital economy platform city of the world, an example by 2025. And we are working with the city to try to develop what we call a smart and inclusive innovation system. And this is a little bit similar to what Raphael was mentioning earlier. But I think we are not just trying to include entrepreneurs, we are also trying to include others to make sure that we address societal challenges which are there, and thereby move beyond the living labs approach, the experiment approach, towards a systemic approach, which is more inclusive. Something else that's been tried to do is there are a lot of new initiatives in Rotterdam as well, and we particularly together try to promote those local initiatives, and thereby in the governance system, set up a quadruple helix structure, which I'm sure has been discussed before, whereby the governments, the private sector, universities, and the communities, the residents themselves, together co-create and develop innovations, and thereby promote local innovations, whereby this idea of co-creation is centering, as I said, quadruple helix structures. And this all demands new roles. The university is no longer the actor, or has never been, I think, the actor which has got all knowledge. All actors have knowledge. And it's a matter of bringing all that knowledge together and co-creating new knowledge, which is central to such an approach. So, in conclusion, I think smart communities do have a tendency to exclude, and it really demands governance efforts, whereby the government takes a particular responsibility to initiate this, to make these processes more inclusive. So governance is crucial in making smart communities more inclusive. We have seen that when you brand a community as smart and inclusive, there is a little bit of a tendency to cherry pick, to only take those inclusive elements which kind of suit you. We have also discussed benchmarking rather critically, and at least we should make sure that when we govern, we look at more than just the benchmark, but we set up participatory processes where different actors are involved. Living labs, I think, and experiments are amazing to try out new methods, and we should definitely continue doing that. They are a very important tool in developing smart and inclusive communities. But they are not enough, because living labs also have to be upskilled and then applied on a larger scale and a more inclusive scale. And here, I think this idea of inclusive innovation systems, whereby we bring actors together, may be powerful as well. But the key thing is that it's never about the systems that we develop. It's always about people. So we should always be very critical of whatever system we set up, and make sure we discuss those and are willing to improve. Ultimately, not only to make communities smarter, but to make people smarter. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ian, for your presentation. It was also a very, very good one. I learned a lot. And now for our last speaker, but not least but not last one. Oksana, please, the floor is yours, please.
Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you to previous speakers. Actually, you gave a lot of food for thought, and I hope that my presentation will do the same. It's an honor to be present in such a scale of the event, and I hope that my presentation will be also interesting. So let me launch the presentation. I guess you see it, right? Okay, so my name is Oksana Zamora. I represent Sumy State University. It's on the northeast of Ukraine. And I'm going to talk today about good governance in the context of our topic. Actually, I would also start from my university as an example of one of the provincial universities somewhere in Ukraine, because it's it's like kind of insight from outside the European Union. So as a progressive university, we pursue this concept of entrepreneurial university, which is not so much popular in Ukraine for now, unfortunately, and we try to conduct closer cooperation with the industry. And for that, we engage both NGOs via third sector, and for example, we have a created SME support center, which was established within the European EU for Business program. However, we see a lot of potential for the university to inspire the community to become smarter, because even, for example, to take a small issue of inclusion, last year we participated in the development of the intercultural strategy for the city, and we discovered a lot of interesting questions which a regular citizen wouldn't consider, even how the foreigners or immigrants, when they come to the Ukrainian city, how do they feel? Because we Ukrainians, we are feeling completely okay, but there are a lot of things which should be done. And it's not so easy for the provincial city, actually, because there are very important things to do, like simply roads or public transportation and so on. And we are not talking about like really smart solutions. But currently all eyes are on the capital of Ukraine because they're working on the smart city concept. And I know a lot of initiatives which are aimed at supporting really innovative businesses. And now, as a humanitarian, I'll present my overview, let's say, over the topic as a person who sees it all from outside Europe. As you know, a central theme of Portugal's presidency will be to strengthen the European social model so as to transmit a sense of confidence to citizens. And when I read these words, it really struck me. I mean, this, confidence to citizens, because this is maybe something which we lack the most in post-Soviet countries. The aim of the Portugal presidency's program will be to ensure the positive changes and digital transitions, which are going to be achieved in an inclusive way. And actually, I see that from all the formulation, it is seen that no citizen will be left behind in the difficult times of the pandemic. And at the slide, you see the 5 core areas that are in the attention focus of the Portugal's presidency. And I would ask you to think about the words which are in bold there. And these are the resilience, European social model, sustainable recovery, inclusive digital transition, openness, and multilateralism. For these words, for me, these words mean much more than they just mean for, maybe when you think about them, for me, they mean more, because I see behind these words, not just, the regular meaning, but something, some other concepts and contexts. For example, if you talk about resilience, my country, Ukraine, currently fights for its informational resilience, being under the cyber flood of fake news and propaganda coming from our neighbor. And it influences a lot. It influences our minds, our hearts, and the quality of daily life. We also know that European social model is something that may guarantee, for example, my old days being safe, because it's something that is turning its face to people. Inclusive digital transition promises even more progress, but not for the sake of technological advancement, but the welfare for each of us, which is really important. Openness and multilateralism, they have always been and will always be the core of the European Union image in people's heads. And this is something that attracts our attention of post-Soviet countries to this concept, because it's something that we really want to have in our countries. The moment I saw these concepts, which I have mentioned before, I immediately thought of the good governance as an umbrella for all of them. And good governance engages equitable, inclusive, effective, and transparent management of the societal life, which was mentioned by Raffaele before. This is not always possible without digitalization and turning governments into smart governments, communities into smart communities, and mobile phones into the smartphones that give us access to public services wherever we might physically be. Why did I decide to mention these components like democracy today? Because the majority of the world population agreed that living well means pursuing democratic values. Yet it's going to be the next step for the neighboring countries to understand that democracy is not only about rights, it's also about obligations and responsibilities. And I'm pretty convinced that digital tools and innovative approaches can help with both tasks. Deepening into the topic of democracy, it is obligatory to talk about equality, equity, and justice. The slide is one of my favorite interpretations of Mr. Angus Maguire picture, because it demonstrates the evolution of the human understanding of the term. And the same need for evolution I'd like to point out in regards to the digital skills and knowledge. We may already witness the consequences of limitations of access to the information and digital opportunities for those who are not regular or not so proficient users of the digital world assets, and that was mentioned by Mr. Jan. And maybe it is really time to do something about the digital equality. Why I say so? Because intelligent communities promote digital equity because they feel that it's a normal thing to do, like normal moral thing to do, and which has very practical implications under it, because it's something that leads to, again, good governance and overall well-being. Following Greta Thunberg, I would say that I honestly can't understand that someone still chooses between the future of whole generations and the profit, as if this profit they accumulate is not aimed for their future offsprings. I can't still understand why the definitions in the books call sustainability, especially ecological ones, still an ideal. And I really hope that digital solutions will help us to make it a reality, not something which is an ideal, which is not reachable. And the last thing, which I myself and my family, friends, and whole Ukraine pray for on these holidays, is the peace. Any person in the world knows what the word peace means, but only those who wake up every day checking the online news about the neighboring country troops next to their border know the taste and value of this word. Personally, I don't imagine what I would do if I didn't have internet in the past weeks, or if I didn't know how to filter the pieces of information coming from different sources saying that my country can't stand the war. And I'm thankful that due to close cooperation with the European Union, my country knows the culture of peace and has internet access to and freedom to promote it. Actually, that's all. Thank you for your attention, and I wish good luck to all of us with the coming days of the summit.
Thank you very much, Oksana, for your presentation. And I don't say a different point of view, but a very interesting point of view of what we were speaking about, digital and smart communities, and what we every day expect from the next day. It's interesting, that point of view. Normally we are, for me, it's the first time that I'm in a sanitary fence. It's very strange for me. Don't have liberty to walk out, and your point of view was very interesting on that point of view. Also, you don't know what really expects the next day. For us, liberty and democracy is always looks like it's something that we get normally every day. We don't have that problem. So I think it's interesting that we have that your point of view here today. Very good. Okay, now thank you for the three of you. Of course, we have two rapporteurs. It's Marcus Lind Nerwell. Oh, it's my problem again with the names. Marcus, okay. And also Edurne Inigo, maybe it's more or less the name. They will be responsible for make a very good resume, I don't know, of our table, and they're welcome also. So, but now the floor is from everyone who wants to make any question to present a point of view. We are okay for the, we will have here more or less 15 I know 50 minutes maybe to the end of the session. So we had a question on the chat from Pascal. And I think Jan already answered, but I think we can hear about what Pascal wants to know. He says something like, "Good evening, a very interesting presentation." I think it was the Jan's presentation. Do you think that we have to consider in equally also culture level and digital skills as important factors in a smart city project? I think that participation and co-design may be able to face this issue and all allow social growth. Thanks. That's what he says. I don't know if Jan can elaborate on this more, and the other two speakers can also want to say something about this question. Okay, I start with Jan, if it's.
Yes, it's my pleasure to respond to that, because of course Pascal is totally right, and it's quite funny how a smart community is often equated with being a digital community, right? As if it's the technology which makes people smart instead of the other way around. I think Oksana made very much the same point, that the smart community is not necessarily a digital community, and a digital community is not necessarily smart. If ultimately we want to become sustainable or have peace, then yes, technology can play an important role, and we should treasure that, but it may not be the starting point of the discussion. The starting point is what we want to achieve. And that is a greener, a more sustainable, safer kind of society. And my problem with the whole smart city discourse is that it's sometimes really the other way around. There sometimes seems to be a push for technologies, which then have to be used, and then they are looking for a problem which may be addressed instead of the other way around, like saying, okay, let's try to become more sustainable, for instance, and then let's see how to get moving. And then, of course, we all realize that technology and digitalization is crucial. So when we think of inequality, as Pascal mentioned, of course, there are big cultural issues. And of course, there's a very big digital divide. Not everybody is good with technologies. And also the solution is not easy, right? It I think simply is a massive effort to make sure that everybody is able to use technologies and that everybody is included in these amazing transformation which we have to go through to become greener and more sustainable. So for me, when I think of smart cities, governance, the topic of this session, is at its heart. And then stuff like participation, which I think Raphael also mentioned very clearly, is absolutely crucial.
Okay, Jan, thank you. Raphael, do you want to elaborate on this?
Yeah, well, actually, I was, I have to say, I was delighted, surprised by the two other presentations from Jan and Oksana, of course, because most of the point actually, you know, apart from my corporate vision, I would say from a personal point of view, I completely share. I would like to just mention a couple of passages which for me they were very relevant and which are, after all, in line what we are talking, what I was referring to concerning the work in my organization. The first one is about the panopticon Jan was mentioning. Actually, from a personal point of view, from an academic point of view, I'm still very, very much close to Jeremy Bentham vision of things, and you know, then all the related, you know, additional contribution by Michel Foucault you mentioned, but also I would say from Noam Chomsky and Zygmunt Bauman, for instance. They were talking about the same concept. But I remember, and I was completely focused on the aspect that education was very relevant in the panopticon, in the sense that the idea to be always observed, and this is, again, we can translate into the concept of smart communities, this idea, the idea of being always controlled, always part of an ecosystem which is completely connected, in some ways put in the mind of, in that case, prisoners, the idea of always trying to behave well. And this behavior then became, you know, kind of an habit, so for them. So they changed, in this sense, they changed their vision. In this idea, actually, was, you know, just Jan, when you were mentioning this, just this light was you know, lighting my, was enlightened in my mind, because also Oksana was mentioning about the idea of education. So citizens have to take part into the community. In my case, entrepreneurs, for instance, have to be part of the community, but citizens in general, if we take the idea of smart communities as a general, I think, again, Oksana was mentioning equality, justice, equity. For me, it goes without saying. The example, again, Jan was mentioning about South Korea in particular, and then the three different examples, Dubai, Amsterdam, and Toronto, is also very clear, visible in various other parts of Europe, as far as our experience is concerned. So I want to say these, I mention these because I think that if we proceed analyzing from a social point of view, from an educational point of view, from a social point of view, our society, then we will be able perhaps to implement the smart community concept, the smart idea, much better than keeping it as a separate concept to apply to a society which sometimes is not completely in line with that. Inequalities are not, of course, also Pasquale before was saying this, inequalities are not helping us. So we have to fight inequalities while applying the smart community smart concept in our lives. It's a kind of litmus paper, if you want, the analysis of collateral aspects to smart communities.
Thank you very much, Raphael. Oksana, do you want to elaborate something about?
Yeah, I could also add from the educational point of view. Actually, I'm listening to everyone, and I understand that, as an educator and the person who is engaged at different stages to this process, I see that when this concept came to our country, for example, we were looking at it as something, fully engaged in innovation, disruptive processes, total digitalization, and blah, blah, blah. But when we came to the reality, we understood that each child who has access to the smartphone, naturally guesses how to use it. But when we come back to the other aspects, we have effects that, for example, small and medium enterprises, they generate the biggest part of profit for the society in the majority, or the people who could be active in business or any other sphere of social life, but they still don't know how to use these digital things. They push it all back. You can put, this highly technological things everywhere at each corner of the city, but it doesn't mean that people will be able to use them correctly. And that's what we feel now, that we have a very economically active, how to say, maybe classes of society. For example, in our city, we have a big Roma community, and they're real entrepreneurial. But what we see when we come to them with our projects, we see that they cannot process information as people who are very advanced in digital technologies. So we come back to the point that we need to educate people first to use all that, and then talk about some more advanced things. So that's why I talked about this digital inequality thing. That it's not enough to give people devices or technologies. You need also to teach them how to use it, how to filter information, because a lot of things, what we feel now in Ukraine, that it's all about manipulation or fraud or something, that you could do business online, but we already have a sector of people who wouldn't like to buy online because they're afraid of fraud or something. This is so simple. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Oksana. I have more or less something like a question, because I hear both of your three presentations, and I start with I wrote something like mutual learning. That's important, because also that Raphael said that networking and mutual learning in smart cities, in smart communities, it's very important. But Jan said also that all stakeholders have knowledge, and they should stake together in a matter of co-creation in creating new knowledge about the knowledge of everyone. So what do we really need to do this when we conclude, for instance, that smart is not always inclusive? What we need already? What do we still need? It's really a matter of scale, territorial scale, or not. For instance, a municipality level, it's the smallest democratic territorial. I know it's very close to the concept of community when we can speak with every day with the person who is our neighbor, where we live with them. We know that these have problems, and something like the I don't know, the real level of community that people who are living and try to do things together. Is it possible? The first question, I am a little bit anarchic now, but my first question is, we know that's necessary to have a good network, good mutual learning, co-create, but what's missing now for, what's still missing for us to not accomplish this? And smart city continue to be exclusive or not so inclusive as they should be in this process of co-creation, for instance. That's something like a challenge for you, for both of you to try to have here some time for everybody who wants to put questions. Please do it now. We are and okay, can, I don't know if who wants to start. Okay, Raphael. Okay.
Yeah, well, actually, you put the finger in the road somehow, in the sense that, of course, we are living since the first monkey went down from the tree in a matter of in a situation of inequality. When I talk about inequality, I don't want to raise other issue, but I'm talking about just inequality in sense of differences. So differences in Europe are very evident. I was telling to you before that normally we operate a level NUTS 2, so macro regions. When we talk about macro regions, which in a macro region you can include parts which are maybe a bit more advanced, part which are less advanced. But normally macro regions, they are not really very good in determining this kind of differences. But even at macro region level, we perceive that there are many differences and many inequalities, if you want, in terms of understanding the new mechanism, new tools that we're using every day. Oksana was mentioning before, actually, the fact that, and Jan also confirmed this, talking about, smart tools and so on that can be used only by a fraction of the society. Of course, that's what we normally experience in our lives. I can mention, for instance, some time ago, I remember in my organization there was an action called Silver Workers, which was within the framework of a European larger action. And we were trying to involve, for instance, trying to educate. Sorry for the word, but it was just like that. So creating learning, knowledge acquisition by people, by potential and new entrepreneurs, which are already at later stage of their career, so after 50 years of age, which for some reasons, including the COVID nowadays, they found themselves out of work and they were trying to reinvent themselves. So this is kind of activities we normally of course, I was mentioning now silver workers, but this is on a general level. What we should do, to answer your question, Elda, it's trying to minimize these differences all over the continent. It's not easy. It will be persistent because of historical, industrial, social reasons which are embedded in the geopolitics of the continent, European continent, not to mention a global level, because then would be another, a very, very complicated topic to talk about now. But what we try to do, especially now with Horizon Europe, is trying to create a common ecosystem, a common shared, as much as possible, common share level for all citizens. I'm talking, of course, from the point of view entrepreneurs, incubators, and so on, innovators, but this is valid for for everyone. So what we should try to do is to try to decrease these differences in order then to create a platform, a human platform, where these smart concepts, smart communities, rather than smart cities, would be possible to be implemented, maybe easier, maybe better.
Thank you. I don't know if Oksana or Jan wants to say something about it.
I can. Jan, maybe.
No, Oksana, go ahead, please.
I was listening to you and I remembered a story which I heard recently from the Peace Corps volunteer from America. She was saying that during the pandemic, they had a challenge with implementing the projects in remote areas in America, and especially in reservations of indigenous people. And they had some kind of training course. I don't remember, either about COVID or about finding a job online, something like that. But the issue was that they thought that they found a solution that they cannot come there physically because reservations were closed legally. It was not just like a lockdown, but reservations took such a decision that they're not going to allow anyone from outside to come in. And that's why they found a solution, as they thought. They bought the iPads or something like that, and they just gave it to a local organization, which passed it through to indigenous people. And they found out that they don't have internet there. So they had to buy mobile modules for internet, and that's how they conducted the course. But my reflection was that it was not the solution in overall, So maybe one of the answers to your question, Helda, would be that maybe first step would be to confess to ourselves that it's not just one step, like technological advancement, but it's also a lot of steps, including coming back a little bit and recognizing that we have people who need to be actually physically taught to open browser and to do some, basic things. And that's why I'm laughing a lot when there are some projects which are launched currently, like teaching, for example, active people who are after 50 years old to launch an online business. But no one thinks how many people would be able to, to use this online course actually in Canvas or in MOOC. It's not so easy actually if you never did it. And for this, I really appreciate Erasmus and Horizon, because in this programming period, they have this vision that, for example, they're not only funding fully innovative projects, but they also look back at professional careers, for example, or some personal issues of people who can participate in this. That's why such programs, I would say they could do it more, but in overall they incorporate this vision that we are not only funding something which is advancing, but also we are funding the social part. Thank you.
Thank you, Oksana. Jan.
Yeah, just to add, because so much has been said already by Raphael and Oksana. By the way, nice example, Oksana. I spoke to the mayor of Rotterdam that's a couple of years ago already, and he said, whenever I look for new staff in city council, I look for somebody who does not fit. Normally, when you employ new staff, you look for somebody who fits. But he says, when you look for somebody who fits, you don't learn. Right? Look for somebody who does not fit. So I think that's maybe a key to learning, right? That on the one hand, you want people who are a little bit similar, so you can easily understand each other. You can build up a level of trust. With people who have nothing in common, it's very difficult to learn, but they should also be different enough for us to learn. And maybe that is where we often make a mistake, that we tend to talk to people who are too similar to us instead of really inviting people with different backgrounds and try to be really innovative and out of the box. And also then allow for innovations which maybe are not so comfortable, but really challenge the way we have always worked. So learning, I think, is one of the most difficult things to do. Because it needs us to think out of the box and go out of our comfort zone, which very often we don't. So those were just two small ideas.
Thank you, Jens. Thank you to all. Of course, we are open to questions for all the participants in this table. So if you want to make a question, make something, say something about what we are talking about. If you want to make it on the chat, it's also possible. So because we have some time yet to be speaking here, to change ideas, not change ideas, but not to exchange ideas, but sometimes we do it also. But okay. I had some questions, but I was very interested in this topic on this subtopic of the topic. That of course innovation is it's a very risk and very innovation is also to advance, to change, to achieve, and it's really a big challenge to include everybody. And if this innovation is really important or really understood or just to everybody, because sometimes innovation is also not fair to everybody. Oksana spoke about justice, and I think it's a very important when we do some changes or when we advance, when we innovate something in the communities, and not always is fair for everybody. But I don't know if we have much to speak about this subtopic of the topic of the inequity in the smart communities. But I also want to know if which is the best way to achieve the transition, because okay, Alexandra Costa makes a question. How to evaluate the Portuguese scenario with regard to smart cities, smart communities. I don't know if someone wants to elaborate about this question of Alexandra Costa. Rafael, okay.
Well, I'm not, of course. I can mention I can talk about my experience, our experience in Portugal. You know, we have members in Portugal. We are very active in with some initiative, and this one is one example of this commitment of ours in Portugal. What I can say is that, of course, Portugal, as all other countries, from our point of view, presents some areas in which entrepreneurial activity is very, very developed. Others in which is not. This is a common sense. This is a very, very, if you want, it's a platitude. But this reflects general idea of what's happening in many regions in Europe. If you take my country, for instance, I'm Italian of origin. There are regions in Italy which are very, very much advanced, like like in the north, some of them in the center. But then, if you go in some other parts, there are still very much agro-food oriented culture, very much deconnected works of life, and inequalities are much more evident in there. So I think that for Portugal, as for many other regions in Europe, many other countries in Europe, this difference is still very relevant. That's why I said, you know, I have the habit while talking to put some keywords, to jot down some keywords on my notes. What I jotted down today, for instance, is more is about differences, inequality. Sometimes I also jotted down the word respect, because of course inequalities and differences implies also kind of respect from our side, because we need to respect also differences. At the same time, we try to, in a way, create an homogenization of different areas. But we should respect local, maybe in this case, traditions, views, customs, and so on. Other words I jotted down is participation, sharing. You see that all these gives you already a framework to work with. And what Alexandra was asking us is very much connected with these keywords I just noted on my part. The idea is that we need to reduce as much as possible this kind of inequalities, trying to respect differences, but try to put all at the same level in order to then move towards the acceptance and the use of a smart culture.
I don't know if Oksana or Jan wants to say something about this question. Jan?
Well, frankly, I don't know enough about Portugal to really evaluate that. But to follow up on what Rafael is saying, I think Portugal has the same problem as many others indeed. That also in the Netherlands, a city like Amsterdam attracts many high educated people, many of the digital industries, and hence scores very high if you look at smart city indicators, for the good or for the bad, right? Because it also makes it more unequal, I think. But there's a huge spatial inequality. Other parts of the Netherlands is where there's a huge brain drain. Higher educated people are leaving. And I would expect the same happening in Portugal, that Lisbon is a great attractor for the high educated people, and other cities, particularly maybe more inland, are struggling to be smart in that sense. And the question, of course, is if that's a bad thing, this spatial inequality. In the Netherlands, for a very long time, we have been fighting it. And in Europe in general, right, there's a huge fight against spatial inequality. There are all these funds available. But in the Netherlands, we increasingly seem to support the winners and hope it trickles down, even though we know it doesn't really. And allow other parts of the Netherlands to actually to become like tourist areas where there are not so many people living anymore.
That's really a big problem that we have in Portugal, of course. I think younger people and higher educated people are going to the cities, and not so too many cities, but for one or two cities in particular. And I don't know if communities are being smarter, but really they are losing a lot of people and a lot of young people to the cities. But I don't know, Oksana, if you can give us your experience of your country or something like that to compare to Portugal with losing young people to the cities.
It's difficult for me to say something about Portugal because I have been there maybe 7 years ago was the last time. But from what I read and what I hear from my friends, I think Portugal has actually almost the same things, I mean, challenges as Ukraine or any other country does, that yes, younger people are more advanced and they are moving to cities. But, what I've been thinking is when you look at this issue, it's twofold. On the one hand, you are creating something, not you are, I mean, in general, we are creating something more technological advanced and competitive, and it pushes us all to use technologies more and more and to find some better solutions. But again, everything is connected. We can work on the cities, but if we forget about the rural area, we will have still young people coming from rural areas who don't know how to use certain technologies, or who are not going to be so much competitive, or we will come back even to this ecological issue that using some technological advancement, we could have cheaper food, more ecological food, faster production, and so on. But if we don't teach rural communities to do that, actually we are coming back to the point again that this technological advancement and smartiness cannot be only in one point. It should be overall, and that's why we are coming back again to the thing, to the thought that it should all start from philosophy, actually, from schools, from kindergartens, when people like small human beings should be explained what does it mean to be smart, why do you have this technology, where can you use it, not just having a phone as something where you can play, but also tell a person something more about that. For example, what I was inspired with when I was in the United States for half a year within the faculty exchange program, I met a person. His name is Scott Christians, and he is a professor at the Tralaska College of Missouri University. And he has pretty interesting course, which is called Digital Globe. And this course is available for everyone, like everyone, starting from veterinarians and finishing with engineers. And this is where he teaches what kind of technologies are there and how to use them, how to apply them in daily life. For example, he gathers the group, which is really diverse, as you understand, humanitarians, to engineers, and so on. And then he takes them, for example, to a modern hospital, where he shows, for example, that just as a combination of a sort of a humanitarian and engineer, there was a new product produced, like an artificial skin for a model for the doctors to learn how to make injections. So this skin can recover like 100 times. But it was just a solution which came out from the combination of two minds, completely different minds from different educational background. Another solution which came out of this class, which I witnessed personally, and which also led further to the smart solution, that he just gave the project for the group, like you should find some digital solution for the community where you live. And this is a rural community. So one girl who is an economist, she came back to the community and she was talking to the farmers. And she found out that the farmers lose a lot of cattle simply because they have like thousands of them. For example, one farmer has 1,000. In Ukraine, one farmer has 100 of cattle, for example. So they lose the cows simply during the period when they get birth. So it's difficult for them to monitor all of them. So in the end, she understood that if to put some kind of collar to the cow with some sensors, which will check her blood pressure, when she eats, how much she sleeps, and so on, it's possible to reduce the number of deaths of cows and of the cows. So in the end, they found a solution how to do it for $200, because when they asked the local engineering companies, they wanted $2,000 for that. And they got a prototype. So it was an idea from an economist, but which was like implemented digitally, and now they got a lot of seed funding and so on. So you see, this is an approach of education again on a large scale. Because in my country, we don't have such classes because we teach actually such things, digital things, for example, to those who are going to work directly in this field. And I think this is a mistake. Thank you.
Thank you, Oksana. Joaquim Fialho is asking also a question. I will read it for you to comment. In a digital world, in low-density territories, who think they could be the winners? And how will it be possible to recover the still digital non-literated? And how will it be possible to recover the still digital non-literated? Okay, I think it's understandable for me reading, but I think you also can read in the chat. I know who wants to start. Yeah.
Maybe as a start, I can say something about this low density.
Of course, you picked the phone first, so you can start.
Yeah, unless somebody else wants to start. Well, we also have to be inclusive in that sense. But the low density, right? This, of course, is a big thing at the moment, where also now, because of COVID-19, people are arguing whether maybe people should or will move out of the city. Because then the risk of a pandemic is smaller. And anyway, we have digital societies, we have internet, so who still needs cities? I think that's a really interesting discussion. Are we going to a low density environment? Personally, I think not, because if you want to innovate, as I'm sure Raphael and Oksana will confirm, just meeting digitally may not be enough, right? You have to build up levels of trust among people. They really have to trust each other to jointly innovate and share knowledge. The community is more than that, just digital contacts. So I think even in a low density area, you still need real face-to-face meetings as well, for people to become part of a community and to have that level of trust where you really innovate and improve. And so who could then be the winners? Well, I think even more than now, the winners would be the people who have access to technologies and access to those networks. So you can easily meet. So in that sense, that wouldn't help. So how can you keep everybody on board? I think that is the $1 million question. And I completely agree with Oksana that education is probably one of the core things. But the second thing we haven't discussed so far at all is that the power of ICT firms themselves may be part of the problem. Right? If a very small number of firms holds control over almost all the technology and the knowledge, then that is not very equal. So maybe we should also look at ways to make the distribution within the ICT industry a bit more fair and honest. But that is maybe a more radical comment to make as well.
Raphael, you.
Yes. Well, you know, from a certain point of view, Joachim put the finger in the row, in the sense that he was just highlighting an aspect which is very, very much on fashion, in inverted comma, nowadays. In the sense that the big question when we're talking about, for instance, low density rural areas, is how do they can be involved in entrepreneurship, which is not the traditional entrepreneurship, which is connected to agro-food, but a different kind of industrial development. So in this sense, the big word from our point of view is always the same. Is an economy of scale can work, possibly can work online, in the sense that if I am on, as I wish I would be, on a small village on the seaside, or on a small village on a mountain, can I still work actively in in a smart way with other smart persons like me? The big question is that in theory, so when you are touching theoretical issues, the answer normally could be yes. because you are online. You can, you can draft your research paper. You can work on projects. You can have even, apply for patents nowadays online. So from the theoretic side of the aspect, it is possible. But then, in practice, it's no more possible to create an economy of scale in this sense, because then you need the lab to create the beta test, to have a prototype, to test, to exchange ideas, and so on. Try to imagine if, for instance, I was recently in your country, Jan, in Northwick. Well, when I say recently, it means before COVID, of course. I was in Northwick because of the European Space Agency. So I was, just, I was going around labs and so on. So I was imagine if they need to do something like that at a distance. Well, very difficult. Then, even if we take this into consideration, then talking about ICT, as you said, we don't have to forget that ICT presents a couple of very important issues, which are very difficult to solve at the moment, which is one is political. So, the idea that ICT has to be shared by all of us as much as possible. But at the same time, the level of control, the ownership of these means, the implicit and explicit possibilities they give to us. So in other words, if they allow us to use some tools rather than others, or maybe driving ourselves towards one system rather than another. So these are political issues. And another problem is very much environmental. The weight of the use of the ICT also from an environmental point of view is very huge nowadays. So we need to take this into consideration while considering also ICT in terms of smart governance, smart communities. I think the only solution is that from politicians, they should keep in mind these exigencies coming from the observation of societies. I personally now I will be I will be a bit polemic, but these considerations, so these analysis of the realities, of different realities, sometimes is very much lacking at policy level. And I'm happy that my organization, I'm personally happy that my organization is working in this sense, trying to very much influence sometimes, trying to give suggestions also at EU level when we're talking about our connection with the Commission, also to try to emphasize this kind of problems that need to have a solution.
Thank you, Rafael. Oksana, I don't know if you want to elaborate something about the question of Joaquim Fialho.
Well, I think, one word answering who will be the winners or who could be the drivers of this, actually the change makers. And when you reflect on anything that happens within the society, there's always a challenge how to disseminate it, how to explain it, how to teach people to do that. For example, I'm reflecting on how when I just came to work after the university, my first place of work was European Union project Strengthening Civil Society, and we were popularizing volunteering. Like in our city, no one knew what a volunteer is. They were scared if you came to a person and say, like, could you come, for example, to our orphanage to work free of charge for 1 hour per week? And they were looking like, what's wrong? Or if you're gathering some money for something. So, but we overcame it. It took us, I think, 10 years probably to educate people what volunteering is, how you can do it. If you cannot do it physically, you can do it via transferring simply funds or reposting now some post about the lost kitten on Facebook. It means that the more time passed, we found different dimensions how to do it. Because from the very beginning, we saw it only that we should establish an agency and people should come and be volunteers. But now we see that people can contribute in a different way. I think that that refers to the like digitalization and making community smart, that the more we think of it, the more we find the ways, the more we will be able to engage more and more people and find the ways how to make it more accessible. When Rafael was saying about policies, I just remembered that actually I know a lot of IT guys who earn good money, and their dream is to work from somewhere from the beach. They want to go to Taiwan or Thailand and just sit on the beach and work remotely on their hugely high-tech projects. So they're going to come to a low-density territories, and maybe if we explain them how to be more, I don't know how to say, exposed or open to a local community, how to maybe engage them somehow, educate them somehow, not just to sit and work at their computer. Maybe that would be like their role as change winners. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a comment. Yes, I agree. I mean, we're going, you know, ideally, we're going back to the beginning of our conversation when Jan was mentioning about, you know, the panopticon, so the education in general. I think that again, a very important aspect is always the fact that we need to make people know. We need to educate people to understand also. But educate is a very you know, dangerous word, because it's been used, especially in the past, you know, to in a way to force the concepts around. I would say, from my personal point of view, I would say that again, I was very angry, for instance, with some cultural minister years ago when they took out civic education from the schools, for instance. Well, it's a small thing, but again, a very stupid example. But if you take out civic education from schools, it means that you will not give already an idea, a very early stage, of a common shared interest in society. And this is, again, something that connects, to my mind, my opinion, to what we are trying to do with smart communities. The more you engage, the more you involve people, and at any level, the better it is for all the others. And then, of course, you can solve the problems we were mentioning before. So, you know, rural, urban, disequalities in the offering of, in the provision of services. If you take the constitution, for instance, of many other countries, every single constitution has the word equal in it. That's what we should try to do in smart governance as well, in my opinion.
Thank you. Pascal, I'm sorry. Pascal came back with a new reflection. I think you can see it and read it. He ends with a very interesting word, not a sentence. Often our issue is a smart city and not a sustainable city. I think it's very interesting for us to elaborate about this also. I don't know if any one of you want to say something about this last sentence of Pascal. Normally and democratically, we start with Jan. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think Pascal is completely right. He puts, I think, the finger exactly where it hurts. That we want to become more sustainable, all of us, inclusive, greener, environmental friendly. And being smart is a way maybe of getting there, but it's not the end objective. So I agree that maybe the end objective is to have sustainable communities. And one way of achieving it would be to become smarter, whatever that actually means. In that sense. So that would then be the next discussion. What does smart actually mean in smart communities? Oh, one other thing, if I may, and that is we at this session said governance is so important, right? Governance and education. But if you look where all the money is going, it's not going to governance, and it's not really going to education on digital technologies either. So there's also something wrong then in the way we set priorities.
Completely agree. Completely agree. Again, the policy level here is fundamental in my opinion. Sorry, Oksana, if I stepped into the flow of the conversation because it was your turn, but I just want to take vent of what Jan was saying. I agree. I completely agree with you, Jan. That's the real problem. You know, also the use of the smart word sometimes reminds me to the concept. You know, the famous concept of Will Coyote. You know, the Will Coyote was running behind Beep Beep, always you know, trying to reach. So he was very smart. He was very smart because he was trying to always to find new ways to catch the, you know, the
beep beep. It was
the beep beep. Yeah, the road runner. Now I remember.
Yeah.
Road runner. So he was very creative. He was very, very smart, but he never caught the beep beep at the end. So we need to try to catch our beep beep. In this way, and the only possible way is also is trying to do it all together. That's the experience I can feel I can share. Sorry, Oksana.
Very well. Yeah. Okay. Oksana.
You know, about doing it all together. I just remembered another case. You know, I'm a teacher, so I am gathering different cases as examples. I don't remember the city, but there was some kind of construction project which had to solve the issue of the big density of population in the city, and they didn't have places where to live. So they decided, I think it was some kind of one of the projects which was initiated by Google. So they wanted to build some kind of the whole living complex, like following all the smart technologies. So they had an idea how to build this along the seaside. And that project was not supported in the end because there was a collision. Like on one hand, they're building a huge piece of property for a lot of people to be placed in. It's fully smart, and it was supposed to use all this you know, sustainable approaches like solar panels and so on. But on the other hand, when they were going to build it, it had a bad impact on the seaside. This is, you know, another example when you should try to catch it all, but this is the question: either we are placing all the people, even if it's a smart solution, but we are still causing the trouble for the sustainability.
Thank you, and Oksana, and thank you all. We are starting to get to the end of this session, so I just want to all three came with final notes on the table that were important. But I was thinking about one last challenge for your final notes also. I don't know if this is something important or not, but for the things that I do and I did all my life, I think it's a bit important for us at the local level. Do you think that this process, smart process of smart communities and technology, they are a risk or they are an opportunity for participation in democracy at local level? Do you think because we didn't speak about the political and importance of the engagement of participation of citizens to get them all together, to build together, and but I don't know, sometimes if it's an evolution, if it's a change, isn't it sometimes if it excludes and not includes, if it's a problem, an opportunity, or how can we make it not a risk but an opportunity to have a better democracy at local level? That was just for final remarks and final notes from each one of you. Thank you. I don't know, Oksana can start this time.
Can I make just a general remark? Because I am not such a big specialist as the other two speakers. What I wanted to say is we have a very funny proverb in Ukrainian. I don't think that I can translate it, but it says something like, the law is like a carriage. It depends on where you turn it, there it goes. So it refers to your question, I think, that it all depends on us. If we take a huge effort and we really work on it, then we will be able to do it. But of course, it means a lot of, efforts, striving, funds, maybe additional, maybe some additional time. And that also requires for us not to put the profits and not to put the short-term, benefits in first place. Because what I like about the European Union in overall is that this statement of sustainable development goals that we should think about future generations. Like for me, it's till now, for me, it's very difficult to explain to someone who is, for example, pouring water without closing the tap, and I say that, why do you do that? Don't you want to save water? And the person asks, what for? I say, because like of future generations. And the person says, so what? This water will be enough for me. And that's it. I'm speechless. I understand that this person lacks a huge piece of educational background in this regard. And I understand that it's a systematic problem that should be addressed. So it all depends on us. Thank you.
Thank you, Oksana. I don't know, Rafael.
I have to say that you try to close with the fireworks these these interventional hours. Actually, your question is very, very fundamental. Your consideration, sorry, is very, very fundamental. I think that of course we need to when we talk about smart governance, when we talk about the possibility of involvement as much as possible, different strata of different social strata together, we need to absolutely try to identify the points in which are most problematic for us. You notice that during our conversation we avoided specifically or unconsciously some very important aspects which are in any case which were behind the curtain of our conversation, which are the equality of religion, the equality of the equality of I don't want to use the word race because it's misleading, but the equality of different
cultural background.
Cultural background, if you want, but yes, coming from different parts of the world. We didn't talk about gender equality and so on. We avoided this. So you see that I want to say with that the smart governance general consideration is much more complicated, much more elaborated, much more in a way difficult to manage. In this sense, we need to start considering, starting from the basis, in my opinion. So what we have to do to build the pillars and then build the construction of these pillars. And the pillars are the ones we are talking about today. So, inclusion, education, what I was mentioning to you, sharing, participation, respect, and trying to be equal as much as possible. Not easy, not sometimes immediately applicable, not sometimes immediately possible, but the idea is to start because it's high time for us to start. Globalization brought a lot of to us. I remember unfortunately I am of a generation which remembers what was before the globalization. But I would say that we had pros and cons as always with when we talk about this, the element of sharing everything in the world, and starting from education, starting from social activities to models and so on. Of course, we need to start from something, and I think it's high time for us to do it, as we neglected this for many years now, and absolutely mean to face this.
Thank you, Raphael. Jan, to start the end.
Well, thank you, Helder, and I think I've got 1 minute or so, right? If at all. So let me start by first of all thanking you for inviting all of us and for guiding this discussion. I think it was a fascinating discussion. Clearly, democracy is something which is under threat, right? And technology is something that can be misused by dictators if they want to, and then reach to a large group of people. So that is definitely a threat, I would say. But of course, if you would work for local government or any other organization, it's also an amazing opportunity to get into contact with many people and use digital platforms and other technologies to reach out and discuss and become more democratic. It's not much of an answer, but thanks for the amazing discussion.
I should be the one who thank you very much for your 3 wonderful speakers that we have here today, and the things I think we all learn with each other. For what you said and what you and what the moment of our discussion was. So I'm sorry if my English was very rusty today. Not today, but. I think I didn't speak English for 6 months, maybe. So it was difficult. It's not just like riding a bike. It needs to be trained every day. But my English is not trained, not in the last month. So thank you very much for everything. And I hope we get in touch and still and continue to speak about this topic. It's very important for me and for us all, for our future also. Thank you very much, and have the rest of a nice day, and attend to the other sections because they have very good moderators there, not here. Thank you.
You are too modest.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. Very happy that we could have shared this thought today.
Me also. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Bye.
Bye.